social control. Spanish were able to utilize, in the case of the Incas and the Aztecs, a hierarchical system, to help, them implement their exploitative system. But in both ways, the English were different than the other European colonizing powers in where they get their labor from and how they maintain control. Allen goes through various examples in countries. It's well worth reading, particularly for people who have some interest or background in these countries. But when he turns to Virginia, as opposed to so many of these other countries, there are certain characteristics which are very important to understand. One, Virginia is part of a continental colony. So if you're going to try and impose any kind of forced labor on somebody, they've got a place to escape to. It's not going to be easy. Two, there was little significant stratification. So you're not going to be able to utilize the existing hierarchy to do that. And there was actually a very low population density in Virginia. And if you're looking for laborers, you're probably not going to get the laborers from there, right? So one key difference of all the European colonizing powers, this is important to understand this country, England alone was the only one to use European workers as basic plantation laborers. The other countries got their labor from someplace else. This is key for understanding who we are today, right? He talks about African migration. He emphasizes the role of African peoples in the peopling of America. 10 to 11 million more Africans than Europeans came to the Americas in those 3 centuries. Most people are not familiar with that. He talks about African migration and resistance, and very importantly, he talks about the resistance, various instances of resistance and wonderful appendices, but he stresses the Haitian Revolution, which ushered in an era of emancipation that ended chattel bondage in the British West Indies, the US, Cuba, and Brazil, but also, and this is significant, it was to Haiti that Simon Bolivar twice went for refuge before he came back. They're trying his liberation efforts in South America. So tying these struggles together, right? Okay, the Virginia Company Charter, 1606, set up, and it says that the people in Virginia are going to have all the liberties, franchise, immunities, people of England. They're going to have free rights of, the English, right? Not going to be slavery, servitude, or anything like that. That's how Virginia's set up. It's set up on a capitalist basis. He goes through this in some detail, all the, what people's backgrounds and where they come from, what they're trying to do. They want to make profit, they're not fully sure, but then they turn to tobacco very quickly in that first decade, because that's the crop that they were able to grow in Virginia and start going. The relations were capitalist, the means of production. This is when I go to tobacco production in the 1610s. Were monopolized by one class, non-owners reduced to absolute dependent. Products took the form of commodities. The aim was accumulation, expansion of capital. This is what's going on in Virginia plantation economy. The Powhatan Indians in the area of Jamestown were well provisioned. 1609, 1610, the English were starving. It's called the starving period. They were saved by the Native Americans in the area, right? And in the first 2 decades in Virginia, the English did not have the preponderance of force that the Spanish had, the conquistadors, and all of that. So it was a very different situation. As they started moving to plantation economy, some of the plantation owners started trying to move to forms of less than full rights laborers, imprisoned convicts, vagrants, maids for wives, women who were brought over to be wed to somebody, and duty boys. That's youth who came on a ship called the Duty. Right? In 1619, you get your first Africans coming to Virginia. Whatever their status was on the sea, when they get to Virginia, they're not slaves because there's no slavery in Virginia, right? And he gets into how the one reason the Virginia people, the plantation owners brought them in is they wanted just more laborers, right? They wanted to bring, because they were complaining to England, we had no supplies, yet they're bringing in a boatload more of laborers. This is a very key date in the history of this country and understanding race relations. 22 March 1622, Powhatan in the area of Jamestown rise up and in one day kill 1/3 of the colonists. And within a year, another 1/3 died. Of the survivors, 2/3 are not fit for work. Now what you have then is you have the ruling elite who control the supplies, they control the magazine, as a totally vulnerable laboring force. This is what Naomi Klein might call primed for a shock doctrine. Right? So what happens is, in a situation after March 22nd, the colony elite embark on a scheme whereby tenants, the capitalist relations in Virginia were the primary ones, wage laborers or tenants at half. You worked the land, you gave half to the person who owned the land. Capitalist relations. The laboring classes were dependent on the bourgeoisie for corn. That was the main crop. That's what they ate, right? They were compelled to commit to this condition dictated by the bourgeoisie. By the spring of 1622, contracts were appearing in Virginia containing provision allowing the employer to dispose of the servant to the employer's heirs and assigns. You could be bought and sold. This is not the rights of an English person, right? People are being turned into chattel. It's primarily European American first. There's not that many African Americans in Virginia. By 1623, the efforts were to reduce tenants to servants were common. And just as in the Constitution, for people familiar, the slaveholders didn't want to use the word slavery. Back then, what they were calling this chattel bond servitude, the custom of the country. They kind of say it with a wink and a nod, right? And it was imposed, primarily on European Americans at first. This was a total break, and Alan goes through this, of English law. This is new condition. This is not a feudal carryover. It's not apprenticeship. It's being imposed new here, custom of the country. Here are some statistics. This is one of the most important. Please pay attention to this slide. Of the 92,000 European immigrants who brought to Virginia and Maryland between 1607 and 1682, over 3/4 were chattel bond laborers. They could be bought and sold. 1,500 yearly. Such recruitment was generally coercive. Few were wholehearted volunteers arriving with written contracts. Please hear that. Many were kidnapped, some were convicts, and still other prisoners taken in rebellion, exiled under pain of death. When I grew up, I was taught in school, there were white indentured servants and Negro slaves. Well, in this period, it's still not slavery. They're not white. And the overwhelming majority don't have indentures, which is a contract signed in England. It's being imposed here against their will, right? So this is we got to redo all of our history, I think. All right. Now, under this chattel bondage, what goes on is there's denial of family life. For quick capital turnover, you couldn't let women be given birth and get pregnant and things like this. Marriage was incompatible with chattel status. Employing class outlawed sexual and family life. Fornication and adultery were punishable. These are rights in England. These are rights in England. It's all being taken away from people, right? Women were exposed to special oppression. Were forbidden by law to marry the offending wife's servitude should be twice. They get double penalties for similar offenses to males. It was made a crime for a minister to perform marriage. Children of such marriages were illegitimate, right? In 17th century Virginia, but this is also important, now drawing this picture, the lives of African Americans and European Americans in this period up pre-Bacon's Rebellion were very similar, the working people. They were tough. They didn't live long, right? It was tough to live many years. But very similar. Life expectancy of bond servants was low. But they did what normal people would do. They worked together. They fought together, they ran away together, they made love together, they functioned like normal human beings, right? 17th century, most of the plantation laborers in Virginia were chattel bond laborers. The status of African Americans in this early period is still being fought out. It's indeterminate. There's no system of racial slavery yet. African Americans, if they owned property, could exercise marriage rights, and some did, right? They had exhibit social mobility, some had significant landholding, some were owners of European American bond laborers. They manifested many forms of resistance. One form of resistance was to be able to go to court. And that becomes, I'm going to get to that in 1 second. All right. Alan argues the record makes clear the relative social status of African and European Americans was indeterminate. It was still being struggled out with the ruling elite. Here's a key case, Elizabeth Key. Elizabeth is the child of a European American father and an African American mother. She was scheduled to complete her term of servitude when the estate she was bonded to sought to impose lifetime servitude on her. Here's a rendition by an artist, right? The jury found that Elizabeth Key entitled to her freedom, right? She didn't have to serve longer. And she had made two arguments. She had made the argument she had been baptized, which sometimes people got away with. But the other argument she made was the common law principle in England. Remember, the laws of England apply in Virginia, that the status of the child follows that of the status of the father. For centuries, that's the law in England. Status of the child follows the status of the father.